Hi everyone, glad to see you back on the channel. Today we're going to take a deep, unfiltered look at why many analysts believe Vladimir Putin's grip on power is weakening fast, and why Russia's military is on a path toward collapse in 2026. This isn't about hype or slogans. This is about systems breaking down, pressure compounding, and consequences finally catching up. For years, Putin's image has been built on strength, control, and inevitability. The idea that Russia is a permanent military superpower has been repeated so often that many people stopped questioning it. But history shows that collapses rarely come from one dramatic moment. They come from slow erosion, hidden cracks, and leadership decisions that box a country into a corner. Russia's military problems did not begin recently. They are the result of decades of corruption, poor planning, and political loyalty being valued over competence. Officers learned early that pleasing the Kremlin mattered more than telling the truth. Reports were falsified, budgets were looted, readiness existed mostly on paper. When the war in Ukraine expanded, these weaknesses were exposed in real time. Units that were supposed to be elite struggled with basic logistics. Soldiers lacked proper equipment. Command structures proved rigid and slow. Instead of adapting, leadership doubled down on old Soviet-style thinking. One of the most damaging issues has been manpower. Russia's population is shrinking, aging, and unevenly distributed. The pool of young, healthy men is far smaller than official narratives admit. Mobilization did not fix this problem. It made it worse by pulling workers out of the economy and pushing frightened citizens to flee the country. Hundreds of thousands of Russians left after mobilization orders were announced. Many of them were educated, skilled, and economically productive. This brain drain weakened Russia not just militarily, but structurally. A modern military depends on engineers, technicians, and logistics experts, not just raw numbers. Training has also been severely compromised. Rushed recruits were sent to the front with minimal preparation. Experienced soldiers were lost faster than they could be replaced. Veteran units that once formed the backbone of the army were depleted, leaving behind hollow formations with low cohesion and morale. Morale is a factor authoritarian systems often underestimate. Fear can force obedience, but it cannot create motivation. Soldiers who do not believe in the mission, who do not trust their commanders, and who feel abandoned by the state do not fight effectively. Reports of desertion, refusal to advance, and internal discipline problems are not anomalies. They are symptoms. Equipment losses have been staggering. Tanks, armored vehicles, artillery systems, and aircraft have been destroyed at rates Russia did not plan for. Sanctions and export controls have made replacement increasingly difficult. Modern warfare depends on microelectronics, sensors, and precision components that Russia struggles to source. As a result, Russia has increasingly relied on older stockpiles. Tanks pulled from storage, vehicles designed decades ago, and refurbished systems that were never meant for modern battlefields are now being deployed. This is not a sign of strength. It is a sign of desperation. The defense industry itself is under immense strain. Factories face labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, and financial inefficiencies. Ramping up production sounds impressive in speeches, but in reality it takes time, stability, and access to global markets. Russia lacks all three. Corruption remains a silent killer. Even during wartime, funds disappear, contracts are inflated, substandard equipment is delivered. This undermines trust at every level. When soldiers believe their lives are being gambled for someone else's profit, loyalty collapses. Leadership failures compound these issues. Decision-making remains centralized around Putin and a small circle of loyalists. This slows response times and discourages initiative. Commanders are punished for failure, but not rewarded for honesty. The safest option becomes inaction or blind obedience. By 2026, these patterns are expected to converge into a critical point. Russia will face a military that is exhausted, under-equipped, and overstretched. Continuous warfare drains not only material but institutional memory. You cannot endlessly rotate units without consequences. Economic pressure feeds directly into military weakness. Sanctions have reduced state revenue, increased inflation, and limited access to technology. While Russia has adapted in some areas, adaptation is not the same as recovery. Living standards are falling, and public patience is not infinite. The Kremlin has relied heavily on propaganda to maintain support. State media presents victories, minimizes losses, and blames external enemies. But reality has a way of leaking through. Funerals, missing relatives, and returning wounded soldiers tell a different story than television broadcasts. Internal security forces can suppress protests, but they cannot fix structural decay. The more resources are diverted to policing society, the fewer remain for rebuilding the military. This creates a vicious cycle where fear replaces legitimacy. Political elites are not immune to doubt. As military setbacks continue, infighting intensifies. Blame is shifted. Rival factions maneuver to protect themselves. History shows that authoritarian systems often fracture from within when success disappears. Putin's authority has always rested on the promise of stability. War was supposed to reinforce that image. Instead, it has exposed fragility. A leader who cannot deliver victory, prosperity, or security loses the core pillars of power. By 2026, Russia may still possess nuclear weapons, but nuclear deterrence does not win conventional wars or maintain internal order. A hollow conventional military limits Russia's ability to project power and defend its interests without escalating to catastrophic levels. The risk of overextension is real. Maintaining fronts, occupying territories, and countering NATO influence simultaneously stretches resources beyond sustainable limits. Empires do not collapse because they are attacked. They collapse because they cannot manage the cost of their own ambitions. Another critical factor is demographics over time. Losses sustained now echo for decades. Every fallen soldier represents not just a tactical loss, but a demographic one. In a country already facing population decline, this damage is profound. Allies and partners are watching closely. States that once balanced between Russia and the West are recalculating. Influence built on military power erodes when that power proves unreliable. Arms customers look elsewhere. Diplomatic leverage weakens. Meanwhile, Ukraine continues to adapt, innovate, and integrate Western support. This widens the gap. War is not static. One side learning faster than the other eventually gains decisive advantage. Russia's strategic culture struggles with admitting mistakes. Reform requires acknowledgement of failure. Without that, the same errors repeat. By 2026, time itself becomes the enemy. Problems deferred today become crises tomorrow. Putin's personal position becomes increasingly precarious. Strongmen rarely fall because of elections. They fall because elites lose confidence. When insiders believe a leader endangers their survival, loyalty evaporates. A military collapse does not necessarily mean total defeat overnight. It means loss of coherence. Units stop functioning effectively. Command breaks down. Objectives shrink from victory to survival. That is the true meaning of collapse. The Kremlin may attempt further mobilization, harsher repression, or escalatory rhetoric. These are signs of weakness, not strength. Coercion can delay outcomes but cannot reverse them indefinitely. History offers many parallels. Powerful states with vast resources have failed when leadership ignored reality. The Soviet Union itself collapsed not from invasion, but from internal exhaustion and systemic rot. By 2026, Russia faces a crossroads. Either profound reform occurs, which seems unlikely under current leadership, or the military continues to degrade. The latter path leads to diminished power, increased instability, and growing isolation. This does not mean Russia as a nation is doomed. States outlast leaders, but Putin's model of rule, built on militarized nationalism and centralized control, is reaching its limits. For viewers, it's important to separate myth from mechanism. This is not about wishing for collapse. It is about understanding how systems fail. When corruption, poor strategy, demographic decline, and economic pressure align, outcomes become predictable. The coming years will test Russia's resilience more than any period since the Cold War. Military collapse in 2026 is not a single event, but a process already underway. As pressure increases, the margin for error disappears. Decisions that once could be absorbed now have irreversible consequences. That is the danger zone authoritarian leaders fear most. If Putin cannot reverse these trends, his authority will continue to erode. And when the military, the ultimate symbol of his power, can no longer sustain itself, the political structure built around it begins to crumble. This is why so many analysts believe we are watching the beginning of the end of an era, not through dramatic headlines alone, but through slow, relentless breakdown. The question is not whether Russia will face a military reckoning. The question is how severe it will be and what comes after. That is the reality behind the claim that Putin is doomed and Russia's military will collapse in 2026. Not prophecy, not emotion, but consequence. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel.